Today's daf is Be'ez Hashem Masechta Bava Kamma daf Tzadik Zayin, and we're going to start right from the top of the page. Well, we learned in yesterday's page on Tzadik Vav a Mishnah, and the Mishnah said, that if a person steals an eved, a person steals an eved. Let's say he stole him when he was 40 years old, and the eved got old. So therefore, Rab Meir says, "Ba'avodim harei shelcha shulchanecha." So let's say you kidnapped an eved, the Gazlan kidnapped a slave, and the slave got older and weaker. So if you want to be mekayim to keep returning the item that you stole, Rab Meir says you don't have to pay him for a new slave at the time that he stole it. But Rab Meir says, "Ba'avodim," by a slave, you can just give him back his slave as is, no matter what age the slave is. And the key to understanding why Rab Meir says such a thing is because Rab Meir holds that a slave has the same halachos as stealing real estate. You can't really steal real estate. Real estate remains, so to speak, in the possession of the original owner. So avodim, slaves, are also considered to be like the possession of it has a din of karka, and therefore it's like it was never stolen. It was always in the possession of the nigzal, and therefore, when the Gazlan wants to give it back, he can say to the slave, he can say to the nigzal, "Here's your slave back," even though it got older. So the Gemara says like this: Tzadik Zayin Amarav. Imi Amarav. Did Rav say Avda, a slave, kimakarke domi, has halachas as real estate? Right? His slave has the halachas of real estate. Amarav Daniel Bar Rav Katin Amarav. Rav Daniel said in the name of Rav, Hatoikif ba'avdu shel chaveira. If someone grabs a hold of the slave of his friend, he took somebody else's slave and said v'asa by malacha, and made him do work for him. He took somebody else's slave and says, "Oh, go wash my car." So Potter, you don't have to pay the owner of the slave the use of his slave. You don't have to pay. Now, why? Why? Because you stole something. You stole, let's say we would look at the slave as if it was like you stealing a watch from somebody. So you stole it, you told time with it, now you return it. That should be okay. It makes sense if you hold avdoi is like stealing movable items. But v'isal kadaitich, if you think avdoi kimikar kedame, that slaves are considered like real estate. So really, when you stole the slave, when he stole the slave, he never took it out of the possession of its original owner, and therefore it was the original owner's slave, and it was always considered his. So Amai Potter, why would the person who forced the slave to work for him be not obligated to pay wages to the use of the slave back to its original owner? You're using a slave, but you never stole the slave because it's not stealable, because a slave has a din like karka, so you never really stole it. The Gazlan never really took the slave into his possession, so it always remains in the possession of the nigzal, and therefore you should have to pay for the wages of the slave. B'rshusi demarikai, because it's always in the domain of the original owner. Answers the Gemara, here we are discussing shaloi b'shas malacha, that really that it's a time when the slave wouldn't have done work for its original master anyway. So therefore, by you benefiting, by the Gazlan benefiting from the slave, it's somebody benefiting, and the nigzal doesn't lose anything because he wasn't going to work with the slave. And therefore, it's pater. So really, slaves are karke dami, but you didn't take anything away from the original owner because he wasn't going to work with the slave at that time that the Gazlan used the slave. Like the following scenario. The Shalach le Rabbi Abba leMori Barmar. Rabbi Abba sent to Mori Barmar, boy name Rav Huna. Asked the following question from Rav Huna. Hadar b'chatzar chavere. Somebody who squats in the courtyard of his friend, Shloi Midate. He just squats there. He sets up camp like a homeless person without the owner of the chatzir knowing about it. Does he have to pay rental fee? Or he doesn't have to pay rental fee. What's the halacha? Rav Huna said, He gets a free ride. You don't have to pay rental fee. So we see from there that because the guy, it wasn't going to rent out his courtyard anyway. So somebody's just sitting there and using it, but the owner wasn't going to rent it out anyway. And therefore, he doesn't have to pay the rental fee because again, somebody's benefiting and the owner was not losing out. So same idea. If you're using somebody else's slave when when the owner wasn't going to use it anyway, you don't have to pay rental fee. So the Gemara says, so that's your comparison, stealing of the slave to squatting in somebody's unrentable chotzer. Hachihashi, you can't compare. Bishlam Mahasam over there, everybody doesn't mind to have a squatter in his courtyard or his abandoned house. Everybody wants his house to have somebody living there, even though he wasn't planning to rent it out. Because when you have somebody living there, he takes care of it, and if there's anything damaged, he'll repair it. And another opinion is, according to the opinion that you don't have to pay rental fee because the person enjoys that you're there. Because Ushia Yukashar, there are certain Shindalit, demons, that when something is abandoned, they cause it to decay faster. And therefore, a person always wants any property that he has, any house that he has, even though he wasn't going to rent it out anyway, he wants it occupied, nichale, to protect from shadim and to protect from wear and tear. Alahocha, over here, mi nichale the nichlish avde. Which person would want that to have his slave work for nothing and not get paid and actually cause the slave to be weakened and tired? So the owner of the slave wouldn't have wanted the Gazan to use a slave, just like that. Answers the Gemara, Amre, not so. The yeshiva guy is answered, the owner of the slave would want you to use a slave, even though he wasn't going to use it, he doesn't have any work for the slave. Because to take out of the habit that the slave should have nothing to do. The slave should always have something to do because then it'll become lazy if the owner has nothing for it to do, and it'll be harder for him to work with the slave. So the owner of the slave is happy that somebody else had extra work for the slave to keep the slave busy. So therefore, Avde is kimakarki dami. Avde is slaves is like karka. But the reason why you don't have to pay is because we're talking about a situation where the original owner was not going to use the slave anyway. The Gemara continues. Bei Rav Yosef bar Kamma, the house of Rav Yosef bar Kamma have a takif avde de anoshi. The anoshi de masib beizuzei v'avde memalacham. They had a big bank account where they lent out money to people and people didn't pay them. So this house of Rav Yosef bar Kamma would grab the slaves of the people that owed them money and perform work with them. It was like to show intimidation. Pay me back to pay me back the money that you owe me. That was what they did in the house of Rav Yosef. Amalei Rabba Berei, so they had a son, Rabba, and he said to them, to his dad, my Tama Ovid Marhochi, why are you using somebody else's slave? Amalei, and not paying for it. Obviously, they weren't paying for it. Amalei, because Rav Yosef answered, the Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, Avde Nuhum Kreiser Leishavi. Most slaves don't eat their bread. They don't work to even pay their food costs. So I'm using the owner of the slave is going to probably feed him. I'm using nothing because these slaves are worthless people because they're not even doing enough to pay for their own food supply. That's what he basically told Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef told his son, I'm not really doing anything wrong because the owner is not benefiting from the slave. Amalei. So Rabba, his son, said to his father, Madama Rav Nachman, when did Rav Nachman say slaves are worthless people? He wasn't referring to all slaves. There's some slaves that do above and beyond what it costs you to feed them. But Rav Nachman in particular was referring to Kegoin Da'ori Avdi, Da'ori his slave, Demarakid Beikuvi. He has like an addiction with wine. So therefore, he was a worthless human being. He would always dance so that people would give him a drink. So therefore, Rav Nachman said, this slave is not even worth the food that I feed him. But but all other slaves do work above and beyond their cost of food. And therefore, again, Rabba was very upset that his father was grabbing other people's slaves and forcing them to work without paying for it. Amalei, his father answered, Rav Yosef answered, Anok Rav Daniel Svirle. I hold like what Rav Daniel said. Amar Rav Daniel Barav Katina Amarav, which we just learned. Hatoikiv ba'avdei shel chaveroi. If you grab a hold of the slave of your friend, v'asabai malacha, and you force it to do work, you grab somebody else's slave and you make him wash your car, pata you don't have to pay. Alma, so we see from this statement of Rav, most people don't have a problem with you using their slave and not paying for it. So Amalei, so the son answered, wait a second. You could use a stranger's slave if that stranger didn't owe you money. But dad, Kaven Demasik Behuzuze, you're using the slave of people who owe you money, Mechse Kiribis. So it looks like you're having ribis, because not only are the people going to pay the loan back, but during that time you were benefiting from their slaves. Amar Rav Yosef Bar Manu Rav Nachman. Rav Yosef Bar Manu said in the name of Nachman, Afal Pisha Amra Dar Bachtzar Chaver Shloim Medato Ein Sarach Lahalos Loy Sachar. Even though we learned that if you live in your friend's courtyard without permission, you don't have to pay the rental fee. Yes, but but if it's a person that you actually lent money to, and Vidar Bachtzar Chaver, and you're living in his courtyard rent free, even if it's the type of property he wasn't going to rent out anyway, but it looks like you're getting ribis. It looks like you're getting interest for your loan. You should give him. You should pay your rental fee, so that it doesn't look like ribis. Amalei. So the father acquiesced. His son was correct. Hadrabi, I regret what I did, and maybe I'm gonna pay them. So what we learned over here is that true, you can take your friend's slave, and if he wasn't using it, you could force that slave to work for you. But there's one caveat. If that friend owes you money, you should not work with that slave for free. Why? Because he's going to pay you back his loan, but in the meantime, it looks like you're taking interest by forcing his slave to work for you. And therefore, in that situation, it's frowned upon. Itmar, we learned in another, someone takes the ship of his friend, and worked with it. Let's say he went across the river with it. So he took the boat of his friend and went and did malacha with it. Imagine you take somebody else's Uber car and you just give a ride to see and drive with it and get a ride with it. So Amar Rav said, so if you want to pay back the one you stole the ship from, so the owner of the ship can take the rental fee of what a ship would rent for a day, let's say, if you borrowed it for a day or you stole it for a day. But if the owner of the ship would want, he can take the devaluation, the depreciation of the ship because you used it. So it depreciates in value. Usually that's less than the rental fee. So it's up to the owner of the ship. So he has the upper hand. Shmuel says, he could only take not the rental fee, but the depreciation. So probably it's less than the rental fee. There's no choice. So it seems that Rav is more strict and Shmuel is much lenient on this ganef. Papa said, they're not arguing. If he took it at the time that this ship was meant to be rented for, so if it was a ship that was a rentable ship, then the owner of the ship could demand the rental fee. But over here, we're talking about a ship where Shmuel says you don't pay rental fee. It was a ship that was not rentable. It wasn't rentable. It was just a personal ship that the guy had, but he was never planning to rent it out. The Iba Yisem, if you want, I can tell you, by both scenarios, we're talking about a case that you were going to rent it. Both cases. Both Rav and Shmuel talking about a case where you rented it, grabbed somebody else's ship, and he was going to rent it out. And yet, the nochas le'adai to agra. It depends. If the ganav's intention was to pay the rental fee, then he should pay the rental fee. And he wanted to rent it. The nochas le'adai to the gazluza. But if he only intended to steal the ship and then backed away and said, oh, I don't want to steal the ship, then he pays the depreciation. So again, a guy took somebody else's ship. He grabbed somebody else's ship. So the Rav would say that the owner of the ship could demand the rental, because when the guy took it, he didn't mean to steal it. He meant that he was going to rent it. And therefore, if his intention was to rent it, of course, the owner of the ship could take the rental fee. However, if he meant to steal the ship and he wasn't going to give it back and then regretted it, and now he wants to give it back, so then all he pays the depreciation value of the ship. So that was the end of that sugya. So we continue on from Daf Tzadik Zayin, but I just want to go back to the Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah, Gozol mitbeya, if you steal a coin, vinizdak, and the coin got damaged. Let's say a hole was bored through the coin. So then, if you stole that coin, the Mishnah says you have to pay a new coin. Mishalem keshas hagzela. You pay the value of the coin at the time that you stole it. So basically, you're paying for a brand new coin. Matbeya v'nifsal. This is the key word, what we're going to deal with. If you steal a coin, v'nifsal, and somehow it was pulled out of circulation by the government, so it's not worth anything. So, or let's say chametz, you stole chametz, but you kept the gazlan, kept it in its possession over Pesach. So therefore, the Mishnah says something different. Nothing is wrong with the coin. Nothing is wrong with the chametz. It's just there's an isser on it. Or now it's the government said you can't use this coin. You can say when the Gadnif wants to do tshuva and return the coin or the chametz, he can say Harei shalcha lefnecha. Here, what's yours, and it's before you. Take it. So that's what we learned in the Mishnah. So Amar Rav Huna says, back onto the Tzadik Zayin, Amar Aleph, towards the bottom. Amar Rav Huna, nizdak mamish. When you read the Mishnah, it's like we read it. Nizdak means the coin got damaged. Let's say it got a hole. And nifsal, the part of the Mishnah that says that you can say Haresh l'chol lefanecha ipisolatu malchus, that it was taken out of circulation by the kingdom. Yehuda Amar, Rabbi Yehuda said, no, pisolatu malchus naimiyahanin nizdak. If it was taken out of circulation by the kingdom, that's nizdak, and therefore you would have to pay a brand new coin. If the currency was invalidated by the government, the guy that stole it has to pay a brand new coin. It's almost as if he damaged the coin. So then what does the Mishnah mean that if the coin got nifsal, got invalidated, you can say harei shalcha lefanecha? Answers the Gemara, it means there it's a little different. We get the leniency where you could just return the coin. Is that one country said you can't use this coin, but you can still use it in another country. So since it's still usable, that's why when the Ganav wants to return to the Nigzal, he can say Harei shlachal lefanecha. Amalei Rav Chizda Rav Huna, so Rav Chizda said to Rav Huna, Lididach the Amrit Nifsal. According to you, that said the word nifsal is pesalatu malchus, when the kingdom took it out of circulation, right? All the kingdom said this is an invalidated coin. So why is that different? And therefore, you could say harei shalachal lefanecha, right? But what happens in harei peris, when you steal fruits, v'herkivu, and then it rots. Let's say you steal yayin, wine, v'hechmitz, and it goes sour. It says almost the same idea as if the kingdom invalidated the coin. It seems like a similar thing. You can't use the wine anymore. You can't use the fruits. Ukutani, by the fruits in the wine, it says Mishalim Kishas Agzeli. You pay the value of the fruits in the wine as it was when you stole. And how come? So you're saying by the coin, you can say Harei Shalachal Lefanecha if it was spoiled, so to speak, by the government, that you can't use this coin anymore. Amalei, so Rav Huna answered, big difference. Hasam Nishtana Tama Berechet. When the fruits in the coin rotted, the taste and the smell of the coin, when the fruits in the wine rotted, so then the taste and the smell is different. And therefore you have to pay a brand new wine or brand new fruits at the time that you, like it was at the time that you stole it. Hacha over here, loy nishtana, the coin didn't change. It's a side thing that happened to this coin, that the government invalidated the coin. So therefore you can say, Harei shlecha lefenecha. Amalei Rabba Rabbi Yehuda. Rabba said to Rabbi Yehuda, Lididach, according to you, the Amrit that you said, Pislatu Malchus Naimi Hainin Nizdak, when the government invalidated the coin, that's the same thing as Nizdak, as the coin got damaged. And therefore you pay the coin at the time that it was stolen, right? You pay a brand new coin and a coin that works for the place that you stole it from, in the area that you stole it from. But let's take a look at another case. Hare truma v'nitmes. Let's say you steal truma. That was another example that the Mishnah gave, and it became tamei. You can say hare shelachol fenecha. It's almost like it's similar idea that the kingdom invalidated the coin. Just like when truma becomes tamei, the truma is invalidated. You can't eat it. And so if the coin became invalidated by the people, by the kingdom, it's a very similar idea. Ukutani, and it says by the truma, by truma that became tama, you can say to the owner of the truma, here's your truma back. So why can't I say to the owner of the coin, here's your coin back? The country invalidated the coin, despite the fact the country invalidated the coin. Amalei, there's a big difference. So Rav Yehuda answered Rabba, Hasan like min kehazeka. When truma becomes tama, you can't really tell the damage. Hacha, over here, when the coin becomes invalidated, min kehazeka, everybody, you can tell that this is invalidated. You know, the new coins have a different picture on it. So it's an invalidated coin. This becomes monopoly money. So everybody can see the damage. Therefore, in that case, you pay kishas hagzela. You have to pay him a good working coin. Itmar, we learned a question. Hamalvas chavera al matbeya. Somebody lent his friend money. Let's say you lend your friend $1,000, and he's going to pay you back $1,000, 1,000 coins, right? $1,000 coins to the amount that he borrowed, and he designated a certain amount of coins that he's going to pay back the lender. The nifsala matbeya, but now those coins became invalidated by the government. Can he pay back his loan? Just come with a sack of invalidated coins and give it back to the lender. Rav says yes. Rav says, we go to Amud Beis, just the opposite. You could only give, Rav says you could have to have a brand new coins. If those coins became invalidated, then you have to give new coins that are something that the lender can use in their place, right? Ushmuel Ama, but Shmuel says, no, Yachal Loimala, you can tell the guy, look, this coin that I designated to pay you back, you're right. You can't use it in the place that you're living in because it's unusable coin. But if this coin is considered currency in another location, so that I could force you to take these coins, and I'm going to tell you that if you want to use it, go somewhere else. Go to the place where you can actually use this coin. That's the expression. Yochol loimaloi, the borrower can take to the lender, here's some coins. Lech haitzia b'meishon, go spend it in the city of Meishon. True, where you live, you can't spend it, but in Meishon you could use it. So go spend it over there. So Shmuel has a leniency on the borrower. Amar Rav Nachman said, Mistavra, this makes most sense. Vilsa de Shmuel, the words of Shmuel is the Islay Urcha Lameshon, that the lender was planning and has a way to go to Meishon. Let's say his son-in-law lives in Meishon, so you can pay him back with currency that doesn't work where he lives, but since he often goes to Meishon, that's considered paying back the loan. Ava Lesley Urcha, but if he has no way of getting to Meishon, you can't pay him back with coins that are not usable where he lives and are only usable in Meishon. Esvei Rav Nachman, so Rav asked the question to Rav Nachman. The Mishnah says, the Brisa says, and it's discussing Ma'aser Sheni, the fruits of Ma'aser Sheni, which you're transferring the kedusha onto coins. Ein mechalelin ala moed shenim yotzes. You can't transfer the kedusha of the fruits of Ma'aser Sheni on money that is not spendable. That means that are invalidated currency. Ketzad. Let's give you an example. If you have ancient coins, right? You have ancient Jerusalem coins, or belonging to Canaanite coins, whatever. Those coins are usable anymore. Ein mechalin, you cannot transfer the kedusha of Ma'aser Sheni onto those coins. But if they are usable coins, although they're not usable over here in the Gemara, that's the Gemara's inference, that even though they're not usable in Jerusalem, right, but they're usable somewhere, mechalin, they could be you could transfer the kedusha of Ma'aser Sheni onto those coins, and even though you have no way to get there to where they're usable, because you're supposed to go to Jerusalem, and you're now transferring the kedusha on Italian coins. So this is a question against the Rav Nachman, according to Shmuel, who said that if you weren't planning to go to Mesham, then you can't use those coins to pay back the loan. If the lender was not planning to go to Mesham, you can't use those coins to pay him back. So same idea. Since you're not planning to go to Italy, right? You're planning to go to Jerusalem, so you can't transfer your Ma'aser Sheni fruits onto Italian money. So how could the Brisa imply that you could do such a thing? Malay. So Rav Nachman answered Rava, that Brisa is referring to Kishein Malchias Makpida Zelzeh. I guess there are money changers, and there are people going back and forth from Italy to Jerusalem and back and forth. So there's no problem of turning those coins, turning that money back into Jerusalem currency, because the kingdoms between, let's say, Jerusalem and Italy are not makbid on each other, and therefore their currencies are interchangeable by the foreign exchange markets. Elaki Ama Shmuel. So what do you want to say? Shmuel said that you can't pay the lender back with money that he can't use in his place. He must be talking about a place where if you pay the lender back, he won't be able to exchange that currency where he lives. So because they don't want you to carry foreign currency where that lender lives. So then who cares if he has a way to get to the place where you could use that currency? How will he able to bring over that currency that you pay back to that place where you can use that currency if the government will not allow you to travel with foreign currency? And says the Gemara, and this is the rule everywhere else, the mamtele ayadei, you could take the currency and just hide it. You bring it into customs and they won't check you. Deloy bakshi, they don't check you. But if they see you waving it around, the foreign currency, the government will be upset. So basically, if a lender that you can pay a lender with foreign currency that he can't use in his own location, and even though technically where the lender lives, they don't allow him to hold foreign currency, but we're talking about a situation where if he held foreign currency, he would be able to take that foreign currency and bring it to the country where it could be used. Albeit he can't wave it around, but if he goes through the customs, they're not going to check him for it. And therefore, that was the situation where in that situation, the borrower would be allowed to pay the lender with that foreign currency. Tashma, come in here. One more situation. Ein mechalanin al moy shakan v'hein b'bavel, which means, okay, you live in Bavel, and you want to bring Ma'aser Sheni to Jerusalem. So you want to mechalel, you want to exchange the kedusha of Ma'aser Sheni, of your Ma'aser Sheni, your Bavel fruits onto currency, Jerusalem currency. You can't do that. Behain b'Bavel, if the fruits and the money are in Bavel, you have Jerusalem currency in Bavel, it won't work, because having Jerusalem currency in Bavel is not spendable there. Vishal Bavel v'hein kan, and you can't use, let's say, you're in Israel and you're using the money and the owner are in Bavel, right? I'm sorry. If the owner and the money are, that means if the owner is in Jerusalem and the money and the currency is Bavel currency, it won't work. Shall Bava behave a bubble, but if you're using Babylonian currency and the fruits are in Babylon, mechalin, because you're living in Babylon and you're transferring it on to Babylonian currency. That's fine. What's wrong with that? Because the Babylonian currency is spendable in Bavel. So Kotani Mias, there's a partial quote in this brisa, Ein mechalin al moy shakan behein babal. You can't use Israeli currency if you're living in Bavel to transfer your Ma'aser Sheni onto Israeli currency, because Israeli currency is not spendable in Bavel. Afagav, even though the Soifil Mesek Lahasam, but in the end, you plan on going to Israel. It's just like you plan to take that money to spend it in Israel. So why is it? But according to Rav Nachman, if you're planning to go there anyway, so that should be a good transfer of kedusha. So why does the Brisa say it cannot be done? You can't transfer your Babylonian Maisa Sheni fruits, Kedusha, onto Israeli currency. Why not? You plan on going to Israel and you're going to spend it over there, albeit you can't spend the money in Babel, but you could spend it in Israel. And says the Gemara, we're talking about over there, we're talking about where there's strict government restrictions from allowing you to carry, to hold foreign currency in Bavel. So they don't want you to hold foreign currency, Israeli currency in Bavel, and that's why it doesn't work. So if that's the case, if you're transferring it on to Babylonian currency, why does it work? You won't be able to take it to Israel and spend it because the Israeli government is not going to allow you to spend Babylonian currency in their country, in the Israel country. Answers the Gemara, yes, true, you can transfer the fruits onto Babylonian currency in Babylon. But even though you can't bring that money to Israel, but you can take that Babylonian currency in Babylon, buy an animal, and walk the animal to Jerusalem. So that's why it works in that situation. Asks the Gemara about Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Heskinu, Shehei Mois Yoichis Yerushalayim Ipnei Kach. Didn't we learn in a Brisa that all currencies were exchangeable in Jerusalem because people came from all over the world? They came from France, they came from Italy, they came from Babylon. So in Jerusalem, there was a foreign currency exchange that made every currency acceptable in Jerusalem. So when is there a time that Babylonian currency is not acceptable in Jerusalem? Amar Abzer, like Kasha, it's not difficult. Kan bizman shiyad Yisrael takifa al umas oilam. When the Jewish people are stronger than the nations of the world, and they had no problem accepting all currencies in Jerusalem. And therefore, that's what that price is talking about. Kan, when do we say that they don't allow you to travel with currencies back and forth from different countries? And it won't work in Jerusalem. Bizman sheyad umas oilam takifa al atzmam. When the goyim are, we were saying it in a nice way, are stronger than themselves. Basically, they're ruling the world, and so who are living in Jerusalem are very restricted on what currency can be acceptable in Jerusalem, and therefore that's what the previous brisa was discussing. One final thought on this page. I'm not sure what the point of this. How did the coins look in Jerusalem at the time of David HaMelech, or the time of the first Beis Hamikdash? You had David Ushloima Mitzad Echad. You had the names of David and Shloima on one side, the Yerushalayim, and the word Jerusalem, Ir HaKodesh, the holy city, Mitzad Achar. So imagine David and Shloima on one side of the coin, and Jerusalem, the word Jerusalem, Ir HaKodesh, on the other side. If you excavate that and find a coin like that, you know it's from the time of the first Beis Hamikdash. The Ezu Matbeya Shel Avraham Avinu. And how would I know of a coin that was minted in the time of Avraham Avinu? Apparently, Avraham Avinu was such a popular person, they minted a coin to represent him. So we'll find Zakin was Kain Mitzad Echad. You have the word an old man and an old woman on one side, which was representing Avraham and his wife Sarah. Ubachar B'Sula Mitzad Echad, and a young Bachar, a young lad and a young girl on the other side, although those words were written on the other side to indicate the great nace that happened to Avraham Avinu, that although he and his wife were old, they turned into a young couple and had a child. And that was the coins that existed at the time of Avraham Avinu. Okay, as Hashem stopped over here. Baba Kamma Daf Tzadik Zayin.